Hello, today's video is called Move These People Out of Our City. This is my point of view regarding day 26 of the public inquiry to the federal government for invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. And this was on November 18. Today is November 20th, 2022. We're going to look at the overview and today's witnesses. As we know, we're doing comments about the testimonies in this inquiry, not the full summary, that seeks to understand if Justin Castro had valid reasons to invoke the Emergency Act on February of this year, and if the powers used by the federal government exceeded the scope granted by the Act. Based on the findings, the lead commissioner will put forward a recommendation in both English and French to the federal government on February of next year. Remember, this is not a trial. And clearly, as we have established lately in multiple videos, this is not an inquiry. All my videos can be found on YouTube, Lisa Prus Research, as well as my own website, lisaprusresearch.com, and the original live feed for the inquiry, as well as historic days, are found on the link below if you want to watch yourself. Today, we're going to talk about the two panels of two witnesses each, and they included civil servants. The first one was Jacqueline Bogdan and Jeffrey Hutchinson, and the objective is going to be exaggerate the negative economic impact of the protest and obviously justify the freezing of the accounts and invoking the Emergency Act to end the protest. You can see a title of Jacqueline. She is dedicated to prepare the different branches of the federal government in case of an emergency, and obviously this was, according to them, one. And then Jeffrey is the senior advisor to Privy Counsel Office. When Jacqueline is being talked to testify about the situation, you can see how we are considered inconvenient subjects. Look at the wording and the creative avenues that she was in charge of put together to end the protest, and she obviously ignored the most elegant and simple of all, that is sit down and talk to understand. On February 5, we have a memo. We need help to move these people out of our city. That is the title of this video, and clearly is very telling as to how we're being perceived. Anyone who doesn't seek alignment with the government will be perceived as these people. She was in charge, as we already saw, of creating the options, but obviously she wanted to look into how to support the police, how to support the city, how to provide them tools, and as I said, not the obvious, that is to talk to the protesters. In the cross-examination from the Ottawa police, you can see some details about a so-called dialogue that happened in Windsor. So when the Ambassador Bridge was blocked, according to them, there was an offer to dialogue. So the question was, you said there was engagement with the protesters that were unsuccessful. And then the answer was from Jacqueline, an offer was made to the organizers in Windsor and was not accepted. So this clearly is not true, because the document that was used to support this question is a letter signed by the Minister Jones saying that they shared to the organizers, number one, which organizers, if nobody officially is the organizer. If anything, according to my understanding, the Ambassador Bridge blockade was even more disorganized in terms of allowing anyone to be the spokesperson than even Ottawa. And they were offered a meeting, time and place of their choosing. And the comment after that was, owing to the late hour, so they don't say at what time they sent the letter, to who is not clear. The letter did not have much effect. Well, you gave papers to a lot of people, to who? And then the enforcement is proceeding today. So you can see how it's almost a trap to justify their actions, because they didn't know who the organizers were, because we don't even know up to this point. At God knows what time. They don't get a response, so off we go. I don't understand why this gentleman, Jeffrey, was on the stand. You can see from the questions, and this is just a set of examples from the Councillor City of Windsor. He doesn't recall, he doesn't remember, he doesn't know. So I am unclear as to what was the value of having him here. Now, when the councillor for the government of Saskatchewan was talking to Jacqueline, it's interesting because we can create a timeline of how things evolve from their perspective. And here on February 3rd, the first meeting about the creative options that we just saw, the act was not being discussed. Then on February 9, then she started to talk about the Emergency Act, and you can see how, and this is her wording, not me, Track 1 was existing authorities, and track 2 do something different. So clearly track 2 is try to jump over the legislation and come up creatively with ways to end this protest. So 24 hours after, on February 10, an Ontario judge froze the GoFundMe under the criminal code. In certain moment throughout this week, the Chief Justice found the protesters unlawful, and here is the declaration. And then on February 12, the concept of IMVE and lone wolves is being introduced. And remember that IMVE is a Canadian word or expression, or short form, I should say, that describes far left extremists and far right extremists. So I don't like that word, as you all know, so I'm not sure why they even use it, but that's where we are. These women that were the second panel, Janice Charette and the Clerk of Private Counsel, and Natalie Druan, Deputy Clerk of Private Counsel. So these people have all the notes of all the meetings, and also are collecting a lot of information. And in the direct examination from the Commission Counselor, they were asking the following. Do we have regulation powers to get jurisdiction over plazas and other areas aside from the Ambassador Bridge? That's a very scary question to ask. It's a complete totalitarian government thought process, and it's extremely disturbing that these women are coming with these crazy ideas. Here they're talking about building a case, so this is wording from this memo. We still have a number of our operations going on. We're close to having a criminal case and taking out the 3 major leaders. I don't even have any comments. You can draw your own conclusions. And here, lucky, and obviously we're talking about the commissioner of the RCMP, did not get the PM, the Prime Minister, briefed on the plan. The Prime Minister will be enacting the Emergency Act. So why not? Lucky is the most important person in charge of the federal police. Why isn't she in direct contact with the Crime Minister telling there is a plan, let's find a different solution? It's like the Crime Minister just walk all over everyone, every single legislation, every single structure, and he was just going for the Emergency Act. And we know now why. They wanted the money, they wanted the protest out of their city. Cross-examination from the Canadian Constitution Foundation. This is a gentleman that does an amazing job in protecting the charter. He's not on the stand. Sujit Chowdhury. And it doesn't matter how many times the CSIS said there was no threat, it was always ignored. So he was talking about the February 13 meeting where the threat assessment was discussed, and it clearly says, and we spoke about this multiple times, do not exist a threat to the security of Canada. So the question from Sujit was this assessment shared with the cabinet, yes or no? 4 times, Janice, the lady on the left, Janice avoided the question 4 times. He was yes or no, yes or no. I mean, yes or no is very simple. She couldn't do it. And then finally she said, I am going to be careful here. So obviously they don't want to disclose much. There were discussions about the nature of the threat and the legal threshold for invoking and the evidence of meeting thresholds. But you can see here from the CSIS, Mr. Vigneault felt an obligation to clearly convey the service's position that there did not exist a threat to the security of Canada as defined by the service's legal mandate. So every single document we have seen throughout this inquiry shows the position of CSIS, that is the branch of the government dedicated to gather intelligence, and every single document saying there was no threat. So clearly everybody's ignoring because they just wanted what they wanted. So look at the body language here. That is very telling. You don't have to be an expert in body language to understand what is going through the mind. You don't have to even understand if she's going to tell us the truth or not. Here we're talking about the narrative that we consistently hear, the IMVE, and the question from the Democracy Fund counselor was there were only 3 groups from the IMVE identified by the RCMP. The 3 presenters that are anti-immigration, anti-Islam. To be perfectly honest, this is the first time I hear from them. I don't know who they are. Not visible since listed as terrorists. So clearly that's not even a thing anymore, according to them. Diagolon, I can't even talk about this seriously because they say they were violent, arrested in January with firearms and present in Ottawa. So let's go slowly about this. Diagolon is a gentleman called Jeffrey Mackenzie out of a basement. You look at him and he's clearly a clown. He's just making fun of things. Violent, never violent. I don't think he's violent. Again, I don't have all the information the government has. He's in jail, actually. He was arrested over firearms. Incorrect. There was what I believe is a planted set of guns in Coots and a planted set of 2 lines in one of the vests or the backpacks of the people who were arrested. So that is not proof of anything. Anyone can put my signature in a piece of paper. Does that mean I signed it? No. It just means maybe somebody forged my signature. And they were present in Ottawa. So Jeremy was in Ottawa. But I swear, if you listen to his story, it's just so outlandish. He talks about a goat that travels through time and is high on drugs. Like, how is that even serious? Who can take that man seriously is beyond me. But that's apparently part of the IMV narrative. And the last one was Canada First White Nationalist Group. I have no idea what that means. At the end of the day, I am not white nor black. I am in between. I was born in Colombia. I'm not either way. But white is the basis of this country. So what is the big deal? Why are people against white people? Why are people against black people? Why are people against anyone? It makes no sense. So this type of expression is meant to create a narrative that is aggressive when in reality is not. And then the answer was, those are the only ones on this email. So here is again the definition of IMVE. And then the question was, so were there others identified? And the answer from Janice was, I believe yes. So the question obviously is, can you tell us who they are? Look how this lady answers. I'll do it the other way. This is an email from the RCMP. This information was not in the memorandum that went to the Prime Minister. I didn't pay attention to the details of which the IMVE were involved in the protest. And I can't give you a comprehensive list of the other groups identified. What does that tell you? Read between the lines. These are the terrorists in this country. Imagine. Unbelievable. All parties deny ever hearing about a plan, which is absolutely impossible because the infamous plan was discussed multiple times between the RCMP, OPP, OPS, and I'm certain that at some point in time, let's say for a minute that the Prime Minister was not informed of a plan. The first thing you should do is there a plan? Any semi-intelligent person would say, what is the plan? That's the first question, not how are we proceeding, but what have we done to solve it? Well, apparently he couldn't come up with that question. So here is the part that was used to invoke the act. The national emergency, critical, temporary, dangerous safety of Canadians exceeds the capacity and the authority of the local authorities to deal with the situation. So the question was, did you know that by February 13, there was a signed plan by the OPP and RCMP to finish the protest? Answer, I didn't know, but there were many plans that never achieved it. Okay, so what? Can't we ask if there's something going on? Clearly not. Question, the decision memo, that is something that these two ladies put together to the Prime Minister, is a document that only goes to the Prime Minister, not the Cabinet. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. So here we're seeing the exact wording of what they claim is the reason why the Emergency Act was invoked. Seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. Well, isn't that interesting? Here, the cross-examination by the Ottawa Coalition. Remember, these are certain people that live in Ottawa, certain people that have businesses in Ottawa. So not everyone, it's just those who can afford to pay for a lawyer. And you can see here that what I call the art of redefining violence. So the question was, yesterday, Jody Thomas made a distinction between lawful and unlawful when the peaceful protests become violent. And then the answer was, violence is also not having access to your medicine. What? An ambulance and going about your life or not having pieces to do your work. Great. So what you're saying is that I cannot go around my life. I can't have access to my medicine because I'm not injected and I don't wear a mask. So can I say the government with the mandates is being violent against me? I guess I can. Question. People were experiencing flags also as a form of violence. May well, yes. Question. Is that a form of violence? Answer. If you're LGBTQ said whatever, you might find that quite intimidating. Being criticized can be violent. She said that. She said that a critical comment is violence. I think that you look a little bit fat today. Well, that's violence, apparently. Good Lord. Question. What about masks and exposing to potential illnesses? Is that a form of violence? It's violent. Everything is violence. I guess this video also is. Then the re-examination from the lead counselor took place, and the question was, in your drafting of proposal to the Prime Minister for the Emergency Act, did you consider the appropriateness or desirability to consult in Parliament, as it's a delegation from the legislative to the executive branch? And then the answer was, on February 7, the Parliament was consulted. Not about the Emergency Act. Well, then they were not consulted, and the PM spoke to the opposition. What does that even mean? How can you even answer that question that way? Parliament was not consulted, that is the answer, and the opposition is not Parliament. Everybody knows that. Thank you very much for listening.